What's going on, knuckleheads? These are my thoughts on Jake Paul versus Hasim Rahman Jr. That's how you say it. It's Rahman, not Rahman, the way Ariel Hawani say it. There's no kha, it's the ha. It's a different letter in Arabic. If you know, you know. That being said, I want to talk to you guys about this fight because it's very intriguing. And there's a lot to unpack here, right? There's the Jake Paul haters and there's the Jake Paul lovers. And they're letting themselves be heard on this fight for multiple reasons. To be honest with you guys, I'm kind of falling somewhere in the middle, maybe leaning towards a little bit towards, giving Jake Paul credit for taking this fight. I'm going to tell you guys why, right? So first and foremost, you got to give Jake Paul credit, right? He's only 5-0. He hasn't fought any real boxers. And here he is taking on a heavyweight who just fought for, obviously, a lower grade belt, but just fought for a belt, comes from a boxing family. His dad was a former champion, Hasim Rahman Sr., and, he's 12-1 with 6 knockouts. He last fought against Kenzie Morrison, which is basically Tommy Morrison's son, who was also, coincidentally, the son of a champ. And he got stopped in that fight. But besides that fight, Rahman was unbeaten. And he's 12-1 in boxing. I mean, this is not an MMA fighter. This is not an NBA player. This is a guy who really boxes. He's also just 31 years old. So, you could argue that he's priming or hasn't even reached his prime yet. And, he's a heavyweight. It's a dangerous fight for Jake Paul, right? A guy with less than half the experience, a guy who didn't grow up boxing, didn't grow up in the gym, most likely the way Hasim Rahman didn't have the mentorship of a Floyd Mayweather and a Zab Judah, right? So, those are the things I'm looking at, and I'm saying, Jake Paul, I give you your props for taking on this fight. This is a dangerous fight, but then at the same time, you've got what the naysayers are talking about, right? You got to consider that. And then you've got some more details that if you don't really look into this, you don't consider in Jake Paul taking this fight and in coming to a conclusion as to whether you like the fight or not. I'm going to explain to you what I mean. So the naysayers are saying, and rightfully so to an extent, that he is coming off of a loss, Hasim Rahman Jr. He's coming off of a loss where he got stopped, right? Now, I want to qualify that by saying that even though he got stopped, I felt that the stoppage was premature, and Roy Jones, who was one of the commentators at the fight, also felt the fight was premature. I mean, look, he got dropped pretty heavy in the first knockdown in the 5th round of that fight against Tommy Morrison's son, Kenzie Morrison. But then he got back up, and the referee stepped in and stopped the fight as, Morrison connected with an uppercut, I believe. But, Rahman was angry that the fight was stopped, was protesting, and he seemed very much, back with it. He wasn't losing consciousness. He was there. And so I think the fight could have continued. And although he was stopped by a guy in Morrison who probably, wasn't on his level, although he showed he was on his level that night, he could have kept going. So that's a bit of a give and take for me, Yes, he's coming off of a stoppage, but at the same time, it wasn't like he got knocked out cold, right? This guy was still on his feet and fighting, and he looked good. I mean, he was winning. If you were to ask me on the scorecards who was up at the point where he got stopped, he was winning that fight. But that's what the naysayers are saying. They're saying he got stopped in his last fight, okay? They're also saying he's not a hard worker, whatnot. And they're also saying, and I think this is the most important point that the sort of Jake Paul haters, if that's what you want to call them, are saying, or the people that don't like this fight. The most important point is that Jake Paul has the leverage. Now, I think a lot of people will say Jake Paul is supposed to have the leverage because he's got the money, right? He's bringing the money. He's the A side. Regardless of the fact that he's never fought a boxer, he's the A side because of his fame, the popularity, the money he brings in. And, I can see that angle. And he definitely, I'll say this. He definitely got the upper hand in negotiations, right? I mean, basically, Hasim Rahman is doing pretty much anything that Jake Paul says, and we've heard, about the weight and the rehydration clause and stuff like that. So that's what the Jake Paul haters are really harping on. But, I think when you really dig into the details, right, and the history and the trajectory of Rahman's career is where you really start to see the pendulum sort of swing in favor of the Jake Paul haters a little bit, right, and their reasoning for not liking this fight. And what I mean is, Hasim Rahman fought at heavyweight, and the lightest he's ever fought at is 211 pounds. Not even fought at, that's the lightest he's ever weighed in at. And that's heavyweight, 211 pounds. In this fight, because of the leverage that Jake Paul has, and I also want to say because of the leverage that they gave Jake Paul, because I don't think this was well negotiated by Rahman's team at all, right? And I'll explain that in a bit. But because of the leverage they afforded Jake Paul, they gave away to Jake Paul, Rahman is going to have to come in weighing at 200 pounds. Guys, that's 11 pounds lighter than he's ever weighed in for a fight. He's 31 years old too. I mean, the body, as you get into your 30s and you age, it's harder to get that weight off, much less to drop 11 pounds below the lightest you've ever been, right? And not only that, the rehydration clause that everybody's harping on, when you look at the details, says that, that Rahman has to be at 214 pounds by noon the following day. You guys, he can't even gain 14 pounds, over 14 pounds back. I mean, and, when you've dwindled yourself and sucked and drained yourself down to 200 pounds, which is what he's going to do because the lightest, again, he's ever been at is 211, he's going to drink a little bit of water, he's going to eat a little bit of something, and he might hit that 214-pound limit real quick. At the same time, even if he wasn't knocked completely unconscious in that last fight, he was hurt. And, those fluids, when your brain is lacking those fluids, you are very susceptible to being knocked out. We know that. When you're dehydrated, you're susceptible to being knocked out. So not only is he being drained down to 200 pounds to take on this fight against Jake Paul, he's also, even the, up till noon the following day, has to stay under 214, which is, is right there where his lightest he's ever weighed in at was. Again, I said 211 is the lightest he's ever weighed in at. For him to only be able to rehydrate up to 214, this is going to be a struggle for him. At the age of 31, coming off of a knockout, this is going to be a struggle for him. And, props to Jake Paul's team for making this happen. Props to Jake Paul's team for making this happen for Jake Paul and for handicapping, which is essentially what this is, handicapping the heavyweight, Hasim Rahman, down to cruiserweight, essentially, and keeping him, as close to cruiserweight as they possibly can in the subsequent day. Now, here's my thing, right? I said they gave Jake Paul too much leverage. They did. Because here's the thing. Tommy Fury fell out. Jake Paul needed a dance partner. I'm sure there's other people that, he could have fought. But this is a big name, right? Rahman, I'm not saying he's a big name individually, but that surname, Rahman, is a big name, right? His father's known. And he's got pretty good credentials, decent credentials, 12-1 as a real boxer. Jake Paul needs that. And so if I was Rahman's team, I would have, and I'm not there at the negotiation, so I don't want to talk too much trash, but I just feel like I would have fought tooth and nail to negotiate a higher weight for my guy. I mean, 200 pounds, we're talking 11 pounds less than this guy's ever been. And, and how tall is this guy, Rahman? I mean, let's take a look at this, you guys. He's 6'3". 6'3" to drain himself down to 200 when he's been the lightest he's ever been on the weight scale is 211. That's not great negotiations. You know, that's not a good result. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. So again, I'm kind of in this gray area, right? While I want to give Jake Paul his props for taking on a real boxer, he's definitely handicapping this guy to the point where he may come in as a diminished, much lesser version of himself. And, you know, when he gets this win, for those in the know and those that are paying attention to these kind of details, they're going to just turn around and say, Jake, you know, you fought a diminished, half-dead, dehydrated, sucked-down Hasim Rahman coming off of a knockout. So, you know, it might have been better, I think, for Jake Paul to fight a guy that was probably like 5 or 6 fights like himself, 4, 5, 6 fights, that's an actual boxer. It might have been better to just, you know, not drain down Hasim Rahman if he actually thought he could beat him. So, you know, it's not a good look for Jake Paul, but for the casuals who are not going to look into these details, it is going to be a good look. So that's where I'm at with this one, you guys. You know, I give Jake Paul some props for taking this fight, but I also think it's messed up that Rahman is being handicapped the way he is, and it's partially Rahman's fault. Actually, it's you know, it's entirely Rahman's fault. But hey, as long as he's getting paid, they're both getting paid. They're both bringing attention and money to the sport. It's a good time, and I do think it'll be a good fight. I do think it'll be a good fight, assuming that Rahman isn't so drained that he can actually perform. Knuckleheads, tell me what you think in the comment section below. After you do that, subscribe, like, and join the channel. It's just $9.99. You help me build the only exclusively kickboxing promotion that matters, Fighters Rep Promotions. Also, if you want to support me in another way, get your merch below, man. Help me build the promotion. Help me build up these young fighters. Also, get your tickets to Fighters Rep 15 at the Commerce Casino in Los Angeles on September 3rd at FightersRep.com, or below if you can't make it to the show. By joining the channel, you'll also get to watch it live. It's the only way to watch it live if you're not going to show up, which you should. We're at the casino. It's going to be a big show. It's going to be a lot of fun, you know. So let me know what you guys think. I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say. Jake Paul, Hasim Rahman Jr.